supposed to go to Christchurch, but then we had that ugly weather in July. I was stuck at the airport with my kids. We were there at 6 o'clock in the morning. We spent 5 hours at the airport. We went home.
Oh no. Ah well.
Right?
Yeah.
The link's working?
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
How are you? Good, thank you.
Did you get orchestra tickets for this week?
I did. Oh, did I leave them there?
For the circus thing?
I didn't know
You
you
lucky,
were there.
lucky bugger.
Yeah, I'm taking the kids.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, see, Liam didn't want to go, so now Grace is bringing a friend. Did I leave it there?
It's sitting on the table. That's
Oh.
where I was.
Thank you.
particular regs process, it's easy to say that. I'm introducing this, it's just a matter of simply saying, can I cover them all in one, the three recommendations, can I cover them all in one hit?
You can just check with the chair first, because sometimes some of the councillors say, oh, I want to book an amendment and so on. If everyone agrees, and therefore
Yeah.
you can move all at once, and
Right.
the chair will need to have a seconder all at once, but everybody needs to agree.
So does the chair move or do I move?
The chair will ask you to move it.
Yeah, right, and then in terms of asking for second,
Yeah.
the chair takes
Yeah,
over.
so you just need to be clear with the chair that you're
Yeah.
going to move all three at once by leave of the meeting.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's all just very straightforward.
It is.
not complicated
It's
stuff.
extremely straightforward.
But you never know, do you?
You never know. You never know. True.
So look, I should know your name.
Maria.
Maria.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
no,
I've not
it's not.
met.
Well,
Right.
I've seen you, but
Yes,
you know.
yeah, sure.
Right, Maria. Okay.
Hi.
You need to go upstairs to take the stick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to call one. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just make sure all the
Yeah, so the leader is ready to go to the table today. Excellent time. It's closing for 5 months and they're all losing their jobs.
Well, you wait for it all the I mean, I'm already banging my head against several brick walls.
So,
Yeah,
Come on in.
they got money, they got money. Solid. Well, yeah, they're quite clear about what their agenda is there, and we'll see with that, and then it's about, not about this year, but about future years. Absolutely, hey, it's a good result for everyone. How are you going, Chris?
walk away from that argument.
No. Serious doesn't understand.
And you need to be a bit patient.
This going and they're going and
Yes, I know. I know.
yeah.
Oh, F for fares. Yeah.
I think, as I said, I think I said to you, Darren and I had a long conversation. One of the things he pointed out, which I hadn't put my head around, was that under DTOM rules,
Yes.
they've raised the mandatory fare box take to 60%.
Yes.
If central government lowered that requirement to 50%,
Yes.
they could slash fares tomorrow.
Yes. 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 Well,
As long as they
came to government
As
once.
long as they have to get 60%.
Yes.
Good morning.
Hope so. Very warm in this building. Good morning, and probably quite a short one, hopefully. Well, depends what you're going to be discussing. Yes. Yes. Well.
So where can I park my vehicle?
Well, normally the members of the public sit here. Given that you've got that thing, I wonder, that's the media there. Do you think?
Just take one of the chairs off.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I give you a hand, or are you all right?
We have seats for travel.
That's the good show. Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
I took a battering on Twitter last night over PAG.
Oh. Who from? Which
I don't know, they don't identify themselves in their Twitter account.
Jeez. Did they mention my name?
As you can imagine, it was the same old, negative. I will be very interested to see how many nominations we get.
There's no excuse now, because obviously I contacted the
Good morning, councillors, members of the public, officers. Great to have you all here for this meeting of Wellington City Council on the 30th of August. We'll get straight into things today. Just a reminder, we are webcasting live, so a sense of decorum would be preferred. I don't have any apologies for today's meeting. I don't have any announcements to make. Any conflict of interest declarations by councillors? No? Councillor Free's got a haircut? No? A new hair colour? I'm not sure that's a conflict of interest, but it looks otherwise impressive. I'll move that we confirm the minutes from the meeting on the 28th of June 2017 having been circulated, and they're confirmed as an accurate record. Although I'll have a seconder. Councillor Marsh. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? I declare this, the minutes carried. We'll move into general business. Councillor Foster, I'll ask you to introduce the adoption of amended rates mission policy.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Gives me pleasure to introduce this. And first of all, can I start by saying congratulations, Justin, because this is one of a number of election promises that you made, and it's really good to see them being slowly worked through and delivered. Oh, actually, quite rapidly worked through, actually. So congratulations for that. The paper is quite straightforward. It's obviously remission for first home owners who have built or have had built for them a new home. It does cover apartments, and that's quite right and proper as well, because apartments are an important part of the housing stock that we have. We know that housing is under huge pressure in this city. In fact, it's under huge pressure in many parts of the country, so any little bit helps. But this probably will be relatively at the margins. We've budgeted for $200,000 a year at the moment, which, I mean, obviously you can see would represent 40 houses. And the last thing I would say is that there is a fundamental issue here, which I hope that there are two groups in my view who are the groups that particularly need to be able to buy and own houses and to have houses provided that are appropriate for them. And first home owners are definitely one of those. The other, I think, is the older part of our population where people are wanting to downsize, and of course that then releases housing stock for families as well. So and the last thing I wanted to say with this is to note something which I have been saying a little bit recently, that I hope also that people start thinking about the kind of houses, the size of houses that are being built, because if you go back to the 1970s, the average house that was being built was 100 square metres. It's now 210. So if you want to do something about affordability, size comes into it, because the square metre rate probably is not falling at all. So that's an important aspect as well. So again, congratulations, Mr Mayor, and it gives me pleasure to move this.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Seconder, Councillor Eagle, wish to speak.
Thanks, Your Worship. I too want to thank you for your ability to get this on the track and get it approved within a year of you being here, so well done. And just support what's been said. This is bold, yet really simple, and we know that we're staring down the barrel of a housing crisis, and things like this will help those first home buyers, those who are looking for somewhere to live, and they can now use this as a small but significant incentive. And I know that there's pockets of land, if you jump on Trade Me, you'll see often that there's the odd bit of land around, and if this is enough for someone to say, hey look, we'd like to buy that, we can get it at a good rate and build our own home, because it is cheaper to build your own home, then this will be the incentive that will go a long, long way. So well done, and colleagues, I hope you give this your support.
No one else wishes to speak? That's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? I declare those recommendations carried. We'll move on to report 2.2, the Representation Electoral System Review, which I'll introduce briefly. Thank you to those councillors here yesterday. We had an extensive presentation from Dale and team, so thank you, Dale. It was very good to see. I've been involved in one of these representation reviews previously. We went out, we consulted with the community, and unfortunately I think very little changed. But as Councillor Calvert is prone to remind me, we're about consistent and continual improvement here at Wellington City Council. So if there is some tinkering, or if there is a call for wholesale change, then we'll look at that. I'm not anticipating much, to be honest. I know I personally want to speak on behalf of our community boards, which I think do a fantastic job of advocating on behalf of local communities, and we'd be much poorer for their absence. I've been involved in both Makara Haru Community Board and for 6 years on the Tawa Community Board, and if anything, I think there'd probably be a call for more community boards in the city because it is a strong advocacy role. Having said that, I'm not proposing that we have more community boards, and I think our ward councillors also do a good job of advocacy. I do want to acknowledge one other aspect, which is an impressive and important aspect, and that's the return to council of one Ross Bly, who first started at council in 1963, I'm told, and I think 53 years of uninterrupted service. So it's great to have you back here, Ross, and that must be setting some new sort of record as well. So good to have you back. I'm happy to move the report.
You need to choose one.
So yeah, I'm going to move.
STV on.
Yes, sorry. 3-1. I'm going with STV. It's what got us here, and I'm not too phased, nor do I want change. So I'm going to move 3I, 3-1. Seconder, Councillor Foster, you wish to speak?
I like doing training reviews, it's a lot of fun. Well, they've got numbers involved, and that's good. I like that. Look, I'm pleased to support this. I think it's first of all, I think it's sensible to stick with the STV as our proposal. And this, well, does it make a big difference? I don't think at a ward level it does, because they're multi-member constituencies, so it probably doesn't make a heck of a lot of difference. But I do think it makes a difference at a single-member constituency, which essentially means the mayor. While I don't think it would have made a jot of difference in this mayoral election, it certainly made a difference if you go back a couple of elections. And I think that allows you possibly to winnow out people who might be on the extremes, supported wholeheartedly by a small part of the population, but everybody else goes, oh, we don't want that person, but they get through on the FPP, but they wouldn't necessarily under STV. And I think if we did opt to change, I think that is the one situation where I'm pretty sure we probably would see a petition organised to say, hey, we want a poll on it. And really, a poll is quite an expensive beast to run for probably relatively little purpose. So hopefully people will say, look, we've got STV, hopefully now we understand that and we can stick with it. In terms of what is coming up, there's probably two things I wanted to say. First of all, community boards, and just to echo what you said, Justin, when we last looked at community boards, and we did look at whether we would or wouldn't keep Tawa, because essentially it was a leftover from the 1989 amalgamation. And it was, well, why have we got Tawa and no other urban? And I don't mean urban, I mean urban, not the Makara Haru as a rural board. Why don't we have any other urban areas? So yeah, should we keep it? But the Tawa community turned out in droves. We did check that, but it was well over 900. I remember it as between 900 and 1,000, but I'm told it could even be higher. People from Tawa who came along and said, actually, we want this. This does a job for us. We care about it, and we want to keep it. And the council of the day said, okay, we hear you, we listen, and we're keeping it. And I suspect if were we to put that up for grabs again, we will get a similar response, and I would suggest to you that we probably don't go there. The other thing to say is that the numbers do matter, and what is happening, we know is happening. The biggest growth area in Wellington City is the Lambton ward. It's the fastest growing by a country mile. And what that inevitably means, either at some point in time we put an extra councillor into Lambton, or what tends to happen more often is the boundaries of Lambton tend to come in, which means that it sheds suburbs bit by bit to other wards. So it has shed from time to time Roseneath, it's shed Wadestown, it's shed parts of Brooklyn. So I think that is the conversation we need to have, and the plea I would make is that we don't just scrape through within the plus or minus 10% when we get to that point, but we actually do something that actually is future-proofed, because this whatever we decide is for the 2019 and the 2022 elections. And you don't want to be in the situation in 2022 where the councillor in Lambton is representing far more people, say 25 or 30% more people than the councillor in some other area. That's not fair, that's not democratic, and so we've got to make sure that whatever result we end up with is future-proofed. Thanks. Please second it.
Councillor Foster, thank you. Councillor Pannett.
Thank you. Just three brief comments. Look, I was one of the leaders for STV back in 2002 and 2008, and I think it was the best system to adopt for Wellington. We always said that Wellingtonians were smart people and could understand the dynamics of it. I actually think it has delivered more diversity, perhaps not as much as we would like, but if we look around the table and how the systems worked, it has delivered some of that. So for that, it's good. And of course, for the Mayor, it delivers a strong mandate rather than the 30% that mayors used to get. They now have to get over 50, and that's a very strong argument. So I'm glad that we look like we're going to be keeping it. On the matter of community boards, I would just say I think there does need to be some consistency. I'm not into taking things off people, but I don't see why one community might have something and another not. So I think that's probably something to tangle with. And just the last point, obviously, as one of the affected wards, I don't have a strong view on how we make the numbers even, but we need to do careful consultation with our communities, because some communities will not want to come out of Lambton. So if we can just, maybe Councillor Calvert, under your guidance, we set up some sort of working group to work through that process, yeah, that will be an enjoyable process, but I think it does need to be done, and it needs to be managed carefully.
Councillor Eagle.
Thanks, Your Worship. And look, I am reasonably supportive. I do know that STV still confuses people. I mean, we have a different system for our general election that's coming up, and putting a number or a tick can sometimes be a problem for those who don't take democracy too seriously. The bigger part of this is that this allows us to look at things like a Māori ward or other types of representation which we haven't looked at. I'm not saying that I'm pro that, I'm more raising that as an issue that may come up. And I also think it's a chance to right the wrong and get another councillor in the southern ward. I think for too long, having two, I'm quite looking forward to just sort of snaffling back the rest of Brooklyn and maybe even Mount Cook, but that would help me politically anyway, or the next, or maybe some other. But look, what I am saying is that it's the only ward that doesn't have three, and whilst we've talked about Lambton and Eastern, I think Councillor Lee would agree that it is a chance to put another councillor to represent that part of Wellington. However, that may be it may be okay to leave it where it is if I believe you'll see a submission from Island Bay at least to have a community board, so you're fair warned, and that may help right the wrong. But the real thing here is about process, and if you look at Christchurch City Council, rather than jumping to the outcome saying no, yes, what they undertook was a thorough process, and what that did is it surprised many, and the outcome was a single member ward, and they got another 4 councillors. So they went from 24 to 12 back up to 16 single member wards, and that was not the solution right at the start. But what they focused on was get the process right, and the outcome will be the outcome. And so I would encourage us to do something similar.
Thank you very much, councillors. Just quickly, in terms of right of reply, Councillor Foster, it might speak volumes to your personality. We like doing lots of work with potentially no change. I'm just not sure the character. Oh, Councillor Young, you were there. Sorry, I'll let you speak. I didn't forget you.
I would hate to be forgotten. So I really welcome this review. I do have a bit of a thing about community boards in today's modern communications, when even someone in England can just be, 2 seconds away. And I do think community boards are a bit like taxes. Once they're established, it's really hard to get rid of them. But I do also support single-member wards. I think this would make councillors more accountable to their wards. It would be cheaper and easier for new candidates to stand because the wards would be much smaller. So, for example, Lambton ward would be 3 different wards. Lambton is certainly growing, and I must say, knowing that we might have some changes in boundaries, I'm very pleased to think I live in the heart of Te Aro, so I think I'm boundary-proofed. Anyway, I certainly support this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Young, and your words have inspired both Councillors Sparrow and Calvert to have a go. So, Councillor Sparrow.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
every time Councillor Young wants to say something about community board, I feel compelled to respond. And what I said yesterday was those who have first-hand experience working with them see the value in them, and they are one of the best forms of working with the community at the grassroots level, and they do a great job around the country. There's a community board conference every 2 years where people get together, very ordinary people who have regular jobs, have regular jobs, we'll leave it at that. So yes, I will fight strongly for community boards, and if the problem is Tawa having the only one within urban Wellington, then I would fight for more community boards across the city.
Councillor Calvert.
2 points. Community boards. I do support community boards, but I think we have to look at community boards in respect of the ward. So if you take the Northern Ward, we've got 3 councillors plus a community board with those community board members. So if we're going to have community boards in wards, then I think we need to look at the number of councillors that we do have. The second point is I disagree with Councillor Young on elected member per ward. I think that would impact on our diversity. When you can only vote for one person per ward, you only get one choice. And because we are not generally party bound in council, most of us are independents. I think that would really impact on certainly on our diversity, because we don't have a party picking members for the diversity to start with. So I disagree with Councillor Young on that point.
Thanks very much. Councillor Calvert. I just will comment on Councillor Pannett's suggestion. The opportunity does exist for any community to have a community board. Johnsonville recently has been going through the process of collecting signatures to establish their own. They haven't been successful to date to reach the requirement, the threshold to trigger a new community board, but that is open to any community who wishes to do so. Not necessarily through this review, they can do it at any given time as well. I have been given assurances by Councillor Sparrow that there won't be secessionist movement for Tawa. They won't be seeking to declare an independent republic with Councillor Sparrow as king and potentially Councillor Day as queen, or that would change some marriage situations. So maybe the process, I'm not sure. But either way, look forward to the work. We'll get there in the end, councillors. I'll move your recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Hopefully those carried. Move to report 2.3, Councillor Foster to introduce.
Yeah.
Councillor Dawson.
You can call me Councillor Foster if you wish to. My pleasure to represent the District Licensing Committee annual report to the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority. This is a required report that needs to be presented every year to ALA. I'm assuming that councillors have both read and memorised the report in detail, so there's no need to work our way through it. I do want to note, though, that in total our District Licensing Committee has received 2,233 applications in the past year. That's 57 more than the previous year. Out of that, 2,177 substantive decisions have been made and 20 public hearings have been convened. That's up 5 on the previous year. So essentially that says there's a lot of alcohol action out there, and we might need to think about that in future. I want to note also 2 previous council decisions that have an impact on this. One is that previously the council has decided to have a separate committee, a commission set up to do the district licensing stuff rather than do it as council. That is an option that we have, but we've chosen to go the other way. The other is, as you will have noted in memorising the report, there is the option, there is the request that we have to report on the council's local alcohol plan, and we have chosen not to have a local alcohol plan currently, a conversation that maybe we'll revisit next year. I do want to thank our 3 commissioners and 6 committee members who have put in a huge amount of work over the last 12 months in the District Licensing Commission. As those numbers say, this is not a small task, it's a big job, and it's a very important job and one that's only getting more complex as days go by. So I thank those people. And on top of that, I particularly want to thank Councillor Foster, who is our councillor on that, and Councillor Pannett, who served as Deputy Chair until the end of the last triennium and then chose to bail. But we thank you for your work. I do want to thank our staff who have put a huge amount of work into this, particularly Claire Needham, who has produced this report on behalf of the Commission as well. Huge amount of work goes in. It is a statutory requirement. There is lots of interesting information in there for those who haven't quite memorised it yet. A little bit of bedtime reading for you. I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. The recommendations have been moved. All those in favour, please say aye.
You might want to second it.
Sorry, you want to speak as seconder?
Yeah.
Oh, Councillor Foster.
That's the longest speech we've had.
Put up a standing request. Thank you.
Yeah, it was. Well, jump to conclusions. Look, I did want to say a few things. First of all, I mean, just to follow up from what Brian was saying, you would actually have to have your heads read as a council if you actually wanted to hear these all yourselves. You could just see the volume of work that there is there. I've got to say, I mean, in the first year or two, I think Iona and I did some total of 0 hearings. I have actually now done a few, and it's an interesting process to go through. And there is a lot of work, and it's done very, very professionally. But what I did want to point out, 2 things. One is the LAP. For those who weren't here, we had 1,500 submissions on that LAP. It is, other than living wage, maybe housing on occasions. No, I'm thinking of the times when we've had standing room only and people at the door. This was one of the ones we had that on, and it was from both sides of the argument, and we were an absolute loser, and that's why we decided there was no way in the world we were going to manage to marry the 2 opposing sides of the argument, and we still haven't. And that's why we haven't got an LAP. And I think going there is don't fool yourself. That will be a huge amount of work with no certain outcome at all. So that's why we've gone back to the default situation, and we've still got authorities who are trying to change the default situation in terms of the law, which is interesting. But the other thing I wanted to say is just if you have a look through here, there are several hints about some of the deficiencies in the law, which whatever happens in a few weeks' time, I would encourage whoever is the government to actually have a look at some of these things, because the government often imposes some very weird-looking bits of legislation without a lot of thought on local government. And if you have a look at these, I mean, one that I sat on recently, the law says, well, if food's your main product you supply, then that's cool. You're a grocery store. You can have your liquor licence provided you deal with the other things. This poor person actually had their biggest turnover was Snapper. The profit from Snapper will be about this. So technically speaking, under the law, that means that they are not able to get a liquor licence. So what's the best thing they can do? Stop selling Snapper, which benefits alcohol how? Not at all. Benefits the public how? Not at all. So there's some real weird stuff in the legislation and in the regulations that are there. And I just say that we as a council, or councils, are required to review bylaws on a regular basis. And I think that there is a time sometimes that central government probably ought to be doing that as well, particularly where it's brought in new legislation. Have a look at it after 3 or 5 years and say, how is it working? What are the problems with it? And then go and fix them. Because some of these are really, really basic ones. And they've taken the option of fixing one about, when you put the tobacco tax up, obviously that changes the weighting that goes into tobacco. Well, they've fixed that one, but they've declined to fix the rules around things like Snapper or phone cards and things of that nature. So that's just to say that there are some holes in the legislation which hopefully will be able to be fixed in time.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. The recommendations have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? I declare those recommendations carried. Now I'd like to ask Councillor Sparrow to introduce the committee reports of the Regs Committee from the 16th of August on page 73. Councillor Sparrow, as I understand it, wants to introduce all 3 of the reports as one. Anybody opposing they being read as one? No? Councillor Sparrow.
It's my pleasure to introduce this report. So the Regs Processes Committee recommends 3 road stoppings. This is in respect to the sale of small parcels of land adjoining 1 Aranui Street, Miramar, 17 Central Terrace, Calburn, and 105 Hornsey Road, Melrose. All very straightforward. I recommend that we accept these.
And you have a seconder? Councillor Calvi Freeman, do you wish to speak? I will take those recommendations as moved and seconded. All those in favour? Just noting that it's for the 3 reports for the road stoppings. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? I declare those carried. Councillor Pannett, could I ask you to introduce the report of the City Strategy Committee, Report 3.2.
Thank you, Mayor Lester, and it is with great pleasure that I introduce this paper. It's taken since 2015 to develop it, and it's a lot of work. Again, I've said my thanks to the people involved, so I won't repeat them. I think the important thing is now to take action. The last attempt was not very successful, but this will take some courage and some money from Council to make happen. You heard yesterday about dealing with a sewage sludge. It is going to cost millions of dollars. And there is some changes that we need in our waste infrastructure to become a more sustainable community. However, we're now far more well aware of the costs of our waste. We know there's rubbish dumps in the Pacific Ocean from very much from our own households and businesses. And we know that we are not recovering the level of resources that we really are potentially able to. So I'm sure there's a lot more political will this time round, and I look forward to seeing some success in this area in the next 3 years or so. Thank you.
And a seconder, Councillor Wolfe, wish to speak? I'll move the recommendations. Oh, it's moved by Councillor Pannett, seconded by Councillor Wolfe. All those in favour? Against? I declare those recommendations carried. Councillors, I'll draw this meeting to a close. We're now finished with the agenda for today, but we're going to have a workshop. Sorry? Oh, sorry, we've got the supplementary agenda. Which isn't... Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. It's closed for the public. And now we'll move to exclude the public with the recommendations. Pursuant to the Lagoima Act 1987, in particular clauses 7.2h, 7.2i, 7.2a, under section 48.1a. All those in favour, seconder, Councillor Day, all those in favour please say aye. Against? I'll carry. Could we please get the members of the public to leave?